Good morning and welcome back. We are on day 109. We are now looking at the divided kingdom, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah having separated from each other. And this is the period between the ministry of Elijah the prophet and the fall of Jerusalem. And we're right at the beginning of this, and we're talking about the way Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. The story is told in the first book of Kings, chapter 18, verses 18 to 40. King Ahab had been persecuting Yahweh's prophets and was seeking Elijah to have him killed. When Elijah unexpectedly arrived at Ahab's palace, he met the king and issued him with this direct challenge. Order all the people from Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, backed by Queen Jezebel. So Ahab summoned them to the meeting. Elijah's address to the people silenced them. Isn't it taking you too long to make your minds up? If Yahweh is God, worship him. But if it's Baal, worship him. I'm Yahweh's only prophet still speaking. But Baal has 450 prophets here. Bring 2 bulls. Let Baal's prophets take one and slaughter it, cut it up and set it on some firewood, but they mustn't set fire to the wood. I'll do the same with the other one. Then Baal's prophets must pray to him, and I'll pray to Yahweh. The one who answers by sending fire is God. The people cheered, and Elijah said to Baal's prophets, "There are a lot of you, you go first." They prepared the bull and prayed the whole morning. They shouted, "Baal, hear us," as they danced around the sacrifice. No answer came. At noon, Elijah was making fun of them. "Louder," he said, "he's a god. Maybe he's having a daydream, or has gone to the toilet, or perhaps he's off on a trip. If he's asleep, you'll have to wake him up." So Baal's prophets renewed their efforts, cutting themselves with daggers until the blood flowed, as was their custom. This continued until mid-afternoon, but it all stayed quiet, and no answer came. At which point Elijah said to the people, "Come closer now," and they gathered round him. He set about repairing Yahweh's ruined altar, using 12 stones representing the 12 tribes named for Jacob's sons. Jacob had been called Israel by Yahweh. Round the altar he dug a trough, deep enough for 15 litres of water. On the altar he placed the wood, and on that the butchered pieces of the bull. "Drench the bull and the wood with 4 jars of water," he ordered. And then he made them do it twice more, and the water filled the trough. Then the time appointed for the afternoon sacrifice arrived. Standing by the altar, Elijah offered this prayer: "Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove now that you are Israel's God and mine, your servant Elijah's God. Prove that I've done this by your command. Yahweh, answer me, answer me. Then these people will know for sure that you, Yahweh, are God, and that you are bringing them back to yourself." Yahweh sent fire down, consuming it all, the meat, the wood, the stones of the altar, leaving nothing but the scorched earth and the dry trough. The people witnessed it and knelt down immediately, saying, "Yahweh is God, Yahweh is God." At which point Elijah ordered the arrest of all Baal's prophets and had them killed by the river Kishon. It is likely that the sagas of Elijah and Elisha, embellished as they are with many miracles and messages from Yahweh, existed as a separate story cycle before the Jewish editors got hold of them and incorporated them into the later chapters of the first book of Kings. The editors of old liked the general tenor of these tales, set as they were at a time when the worship of Yahweh was subject to persecution and death in the northern kingdom by wicked Ahab and Jezebel. Today's episode was the beginning of the fight back, and Elijah took the challenge right to the king, who, with his wife, were devotees of Phoenician deities. Mount Carmel was a sanctuary for the Phoenicians, as well as those who worshipped Yahweh, and Elijah's taunts point to a big difference of the understanding of deity between the two faiths. Elijah's sermon asks the people to choose between an imaginary God and the real one. The lightning strike that consumed Elijah's sacrifice was regarded as the confirmatory act of God that returned the people to Yahweh. Yet it is clear that here we are still a long way from a Christian understanding of God. The Elijah stories concentrate on God as a nature deity. The Elijah stories concentrate on God as a nature deity sending lightning in this case, and that earthquake we read about back on day 17, which you can read about in the 19th chapter of the first book of Kings. Yahweh challenges the Phoenician gods in these stories, outdoing their presumed power over rain and fertility. The fight back, though, has a political and a diplomatic element, which emerges after the earthquake on Mount Sinai and the still small voice of God, which we have read about already. Elijah was in a cave, you will remember, on God's mountain, still hiding from Jezebel's wrath at having her clergy slaughtered. The power of God put fresh heart into Elijah, and Yahweh gave him orders to anoint new kings for Syria and Israel, and to appoint a successor for himself. All these events took some time to work themselves out, but Ahab and Jezebel remain the bête noire of Old Testament history. Tomorrow we shall skip to the point where Elijah is encouraged to think about appointing his successor, his assistant, Elisha. See you tomorrow.